Hey guys and girls, Bored now, back with you on this video. I return to Stranger Things. So Stranger Things 2, episode 6, chapter 6. The episode is called Spy, so full spoilers from the start of this review as always. This episode, it was good again. I enjoyed it mostly. I think it was a bit more of a mixed bag, this one. There was some things I was more keen on than other stuff, and part of it I think might have just been because the main characters, the group in general, were a bit more split in this episode. There weren't, obviously for storyline reasons, they were a bit more divided, and there's definitely some standout scenes, and overall it was another really enjoyable episode. It does some important storyline stuff, but there's definitely some stuff I enjoyed more than ever. The Nancy Jonathan stuff was weaker in this episode. It wasn't as good as it sort of feels like a bit of a stopgap episode in some ways for them, even though obviously they get together, and I'll talk a bit about that scene. And I think also there's maybe a sense that the Will plot, as important as it may be, needs to calm down a bit, because it really has got very intense over the last few, but it sort of feels like it's reached its peak a bit now. But I'll end on a high. I'll end with the Dustin, Steve, Lucas, Max stuff, because that stuff is really fantastic. So I'll just cover the Nancy Jonathan stuff briefly, because they're obviously still at UFO guy's house, and they obviously spend the night there. They've obviously come up with this solution, this sort of plan moving forward, but they spend the night there, and in a way we get a quirky sort of love type thing between them, where he kind of convinces them that they really are in love and they're kidding each other if they're saying they're just friends. I mean, I know Rachel watching this scene will be screaming at the screen pretty much, especially since at one point UFO guy, I forget his name now, but he even says, we like Steve, but we don't love Steve, which he's right on that one. I'll say that one. Don't hate me, Rachel, but I think he is right on that one. And I won't say too much about this scene, because I think it is forced. I think it's a bit contrived, and it takes away from their characters a little bit. But at the same time, I can't hate the scene too much, because it's fine to watch. It's quite entertaining to watch. There's some funny dialogue and exchanges. It's just from a storyline point of view, it's not that great or compelling, and it does feel a bit forced, and it sort of feels a bit like a scene that doesn't really need to be in the episode. But UFO guy says a bunch of stuff, which maybe if you're shipping them, you're sort of thinking a little bit anyway. Attractive people, you've got chemistry, blah blah blah, that sort of thing. And he obviously suggests, well, there's a pull-out bed, Jonathan, if you want it, but I'll leave my bed and you guys can get it on, is basically what he's saying. And obviously they do end up, they do the whole screwball comedy type scenario where they meet in the hallway, and they're both joking, no, he's deluded, that sort of thing, and they're obviously hiding their feelings, and they get together and sleep together, and it does feel forced, but it's fine. And obviously the gag of the episode, the line of the episode, is probably UFO guys the next morning, where he's like, so Jonathan, how's the pull out? And that absolutely killed me. This whole scene was worth it just for that line and that delivery. So there you have it. That's their stuff. They obviously leave the next morning and head back. So there's not that much to talk about with Jonathan and Nancy in this episode, really. Obviously, the Will stuff again takes up a lot of the episode. They start testing him at the lab. They finally come to the conclusion that he might be like part of some sort of a virus, and they're talking about if they can cure it, and like they're debating really if they can actually save Will. But being sort of quite, scientists, they're sort of not, in some ways they're not thinking too much about Will. They're thinking about their own sort of self-interest. And I will say, like, the Owens character played by Paul Reiser, he has a bit more of a conscience, like if you compare him to like the Modine character from last season, because he's saying, well, are we really going to do this? Because they're talking about obviously destroying the whole place, like setting it all alight, and they're sort of quite selfishly saying it may be too late to save this kid. The infection might have already got to him and you can't save him. And there's certain things going on with Will again where he, like when he first recovers, he doesn't seem to know everybody. He doesn't seem to quite have his awareness, or like he reacts funnily to Bob. I don't know if that's some sort of like metaphor, like talking to the audience with that one, because Bob's a little bit of an outsider. But as the episode goes on and things get a bit more intense, they come to the conclusion that Will is probably being controlled by this thing. And obviously the two plots, like with like the Dustin stuff, Lucas on the other end, and then Will and Joyce and the rest of them at this place, start to connect a bit more. But it leads to this like massive set piece where like the soldier guys, because at one point Will says about them, then they hurt or they hurt Will, and they're not happy about that, talking about the monster type thing that he's been having visions about, the shadow monster. So there's this sense that Will is being controlled by these things, and also that maybe they sort of see him as some sort of like leader type thing. So that's pretty interesting stuff right there. But as I said, it builds to like this big set piece where the soldier guys go in and they think they're gonna like torch the place, but it turns out it's like a trap, a setup, which Mike actually figures out, because of course he does. And it turns out that they're laying in wait, and they kill those soldier guys, because they're drawn away from like the whole scenario with Dustin and the rest, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it turned out to be like a setup, and they're all these creatures like the Demogorgons and what have you are heading towards this one location. So it builds really nicely. It's another strong ending and like cliffhanger to the episode. So switching over to the other side of the plot, and this continuing bromance with Steve Harrington and Dustin, which is absolutely glorious. And on this side, you do get a nice sense of a group and things really kicking into place, because there's some good stuff with Lucas and Max as well. Also, I'll say about Erica, Lucas's sister, who is so funny and so cute and kind of badass, and she of course becomes a bigger character next season. But I actually forgot last episode that she was the one who picked up when Dustin was trying to contact Lucas, the whole Code Red thing, and she basically, says, here's a Code Red or something, go away or shut up or something. And of course she didn't give Lucas the message, but Erica's one of those characters that can really steal scenes. She's really adorable. But in this, like, she's playing with like a He-Man like action figure and like some of a doll, and like doing like a romance type thing. And Lucas, sort of being all nerdy, points out, well, they're not even in the same universe. You can't have them getting together. And they feel like quite a natural brother and sister. But that's where Erica mentions about the Code Red, like just flippantly mentions it. And Lucas is obviously really annoyed that she didn't give him the message. So that's when he contacts Dustin, and he's already there with Steve. And they set up a whole gang. Lucas goes and gets Max as well. That Max sneaks out without Billy realising, but they obviously come as well. He says, "Well, you want me to convince you, right? Well, come with me. I'll show you." So all this stuff with this four people in this episode are so great, but this is really the episode, I think, where Steve Harrington really comes into his own and really feels like part of the group. And again, I'll talk more about this stuff with Rachel at some point, but this is why I think for his character and for the sake of the show, it's much better to have him not with Nancy. Obviously they can still have interactions and stuff, but this is the stuff where he really excels. And the scenes with Dustin are the highlights of this episode. They're just so fantastic when he's giving him relationship advice and he's giving him various things. So he says stuff like, some girls like it a bit, more intense, a bit more hot and heavy. Some like it more like stealthy. He uses the comparison ninja, and he's telling Dustin to sort of play it cool, not give away too much, but just sort of be there, and different advice. And you've obviously there's a sweet moment actually, because Dustin says, "Well, which sort of girl was Nancy?" And Steve's like, "Well, Nancy's something else. She's completely different to anyone else." And that's sweet, because that's a line that shows that he still cares about her. And it's also a nice little moment between the two of them, because I think Dustin nods and says, "Yeah, she is," because of course Dustin has, as well as having a bit of a crush on Max, also has a crush on Nancy, which is a very relatable thing, and you can see why he would have a crush on Nancy. So that's a good moment between those two as two characters who both have feelings for her. But it's a fun little scene, and it's quite, it's very funny but very endearing. And obviously the punchline is when Steve mentions this, was it Farrah Fawcett hairspray that he uses, which is really funny. And he's like, "If you mention this to anyone, Henderson, yeah, God help me, you're in trouble." So it's a really endearing side to Steve Harrington, that shows, because he's acting trying to be a bit cool in the scene, but at the same time he is giving Dustin pretty good advice at times, and actually looking out for him. He's obviously, they're talking about Max, so advice on that. And there's some great scenes with them. I think Steve with the baseball bat, and them just sparring off each other, because later when Lucas and Max arrives, there's some good banter there. Where there's I think at one point he calls them dickheads or arseholes, or it's get into gear, people. And Lucas and Max are getting closer as well. I really start to ship them in this episode, because she opens up to him later when they're waiting for the Demogorgons to arrive, and opens up about the family situation and why they move, and that parents got divorced, and that Billy's actually a stepbrother and stuff. And she starts saying, I don't want to be like my stepbrother. And in some ways it's almost apologising for him and the way he's been towards Lucas and others. And Lucas confirms, you're nothing like him, basically, which obviously is right on. And they start to bond. This is the first time where they've truly started to connect, and they do have quite a cutie sort of exchange where Luke is like, "Well, I enjoyed talking to you What? Oh, Mad Max, of course he calls her, and she's like, well, I enjoy talking to you as well, stalker. And it's the first time she's like used that term affectionately towards him. So it's a nice scene, and obviously all this stuff with those characters, I can't fault at all. It's great stuff. They're setting up like the den to get ready for like the Demogorgons, and they're trying to lure them out, and visually this stuff plays really well at the end because Steve's out there with a baseball bat and it's all misty and foggy, which adds to like the look of it and the tension, and he sort of hits and runs. Again, we see some like heroic stuff from him, and they come after them in the bus, and it looks like they're sort of doomed for, but that's when they like peel off. But yeah, really good stuff. I can't fault any of that stuff. That was really enjoyable, and it was another good episode. It's just overall maybe it's not as good as some of the recent episodes we've got. So that's Stranger Things 2. Once again, The Spy, so chapter 6. So I'm getting close now to the end of this season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of some of the stuff, some of the Jonathan Nancy stuff in this one? What do you think about the Demogorgon stuff and Steve Dustin, various things? What do you think of the Will plot, the stuff going on there? Let me know. And like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. And I'll be back with more Stranger Things soon. Thanks guys. See you later.